Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1470. The topic is training, and the title is, Should Men and Women Train the Same? This is a great question. I had this come up with one of my clients. They were just talking about strength progression and muscle size progression, and if it was different for men versus women. And in our discussion, we basically talked about the answer is yes and no. Should women train the same as men? Yes, in some ways, but no, as in other ways. So, I thought it would be a good podcast. We've touched on male versus female training for powerlifting before, but now we're just going to talk about kind of in general. What we're looking for now is let's assume for the rest of the podcast that the male and the female had the exact same goal. So if somebody's goal is to, change their muscle shape and lose a bunch of fat, whether it's a male or female, we're going to assume that they're having the same goal. If their goal is to get super strong, their goal is to build the biggest muscles. Whatever the goal is, if we're comparing male versus female, we're going to assume that they're doing the exact same goal. Because if the female was training for strength and the male was training for fat loss, should they be training different? Yeah. But that would have nothing to do with them being male versus female. It would just be they had different goals. So if we assume that they have the same goal, should a male and a female train the same? In one aspect, yes, they should, because muscle fibers, the muscle structure, and the way in which muscles are stimulated to change are the same between males and females. Males might have more muscle, but it's the same type of structure. It's the same material. So males and females, the muscle mass that you're trying to change, whether you're trying to grow it, make it stronger, all these odds and ends, the system of muscle is relatively the same. So there's really no difference. So therefore, the same stimulation should work for male and female and male. So that aspect of it, they should train the exact same. Now, there are nuances of differences. And that's where it becomes very fun, and this is why that client, she's a female, and we were talking about her program because her program looked different than her husband's, even though they actually have the same goal. And she was like, well, why is that the case? So we got into the rest of what I'm going to talk about now, which I love this stuff. I love. So it's my favorite stuff. I just like nerding out and getting into some details. So if we think of the way in which we can stimulate muscles to grow, we have a podcast, 1219, which we'll talk about it in way more detail. It's a Q&A podcast titled, Can You Change the Shape of Muscles? If you want to find that podcast, you can go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com. On the homepage, I have a link and instructions on how to find older podcasts. So, podcast 1219, you want to listen to that. Again, it's titled, Can You Change the Shape of Muscles? The way in which we can stimulate muscles to change is through shear force and cellular stress. Shear force means you're lifting something so freaking heavy, it's actually breaking the structures of the muscle cell. The body then has to go in and say, well, that wasn't good. Let's make those things thicker, more robust. Let's make them stronger. So that would be one way you can stimulate muscle change. The other method is cellular stress. And this would be the muscle's super pumped, it's screaming, and you're just kind of driving it further and further into that like burning horribleness, like that pump. When people say they want to get a pump, it would be through those kind of mechanisms. And there's a lot of details I'm going to skip past because I want to talk about everything else. So if you want to learn more about the details of that, podcast 1219 would be a great podcast. So now, this is interesting because when you look at training differences of male versus female, there's really no difference whatsoever. But there is a difference in weaker lifters versus stronger lifters. Unfortunately, women typically get categorized as weaker lifters, then that sucks. That's not like right, you know. There are so many women that can outlift a man, for sure, 100% for sure. I make sure of it. I train those women. So my mom just competed in a powerlifting meet recently. She's oh gosh, how old is she? I think she's 64. And she just squatted 270 pounds, bench pressed over her body weight. I think it was 152 pounds, and she deadlifted 330 pounds at 64 years old. Okay, she's only like 5 foot tall, so very strong, very, very, very strong. So when we talk about male versus female, and in what I'm going to talk about the rest of the section here, I'm really comparing weaker lifters versus stronger lifters. So let's throw the male versus female thing out the window. We know that there's no like gender difference in muscle fiber type and structure. So we can kind of, think past that. So what we're going to talk about now is weaker lifters versus stronger lifters. The weaker the person is, when they lift heavy, quote unquote heavy for them, the amount of weight they can lift doesn't cause as much shear force damage as a stronger lifter. So if I'm doing squats with 400 pounds on my back versus 200 pounds on my back, even if 200 pounds feels as hard as the 400 pounds does for the other person, 200 pounds in general just does not cause as much shear force damage to the tissues as 400 does. So a stronger person is able to create more shear force damage with the work that they do. So a weaker person is not as able to create as much shear force damage. And since strength-based fibers, so this is even more important for strength athletes or people wanting to build muscle tissue, okay? So like build bigger muscles. Super important. Is since strength fibers, the thick, dense, explosive fibers that we have in our body, are best grown through shear force damage, meaning it's easier to create damage to the tissue, the muscle tissues, through heavy weight loads, the shear force damage, into those types of fibers, than it is to use lighter weight loads, the cellular stress model, into those muscle fibers. They're so thick that the cellular stress aspect doesn't really work very well. So shear force weight loads and stimulus builds the thicker, more explosive strength-based fibers better. So it makes sense then that a weaker lifter cannot grow those fibers as quickly as a stronger lifter can. So if they were to train the same, the stronger lifter would get stronger faster than the weaker lifter would get stronger. Now, there's a lot more to unpack here that I could spend, hours on. Is the stronger lifter is already really proficient in technique, whereas the weaker lifter is not. So the weaker lifter might be able to make faster progress, it looks like, in terms of total weight load used in an exercise, but that's mostly due to technical proficiency. Technical improvements. Not that they actually got much stronger, they just got better at showing their strength. Whereas a stronger lifter is already really good at technique, so the only way they can get more weight on the bar is to actually get stronger. This is why beginners tend to put more weight load faster on the bar. It's not that they're getting stronger faster, they're getting more proficient in technique faster. They have way more room in technique improvement than advanced lifters do. So this is super nuancey and really fun to know, because beginning lifters don't necessarily get stronger faster than stronger lifters do. They just get more weight load displayed in their lifts because their technique and coordination improves faster. Very important, very interesting to know. So what this means is that weaker lifters should lift heavier and lift heavier more often and for more volume than stronger lifters. So, for example, if you're doing, a couple working sets for strength, a stronger lifter can do 3 sets of 3 reps, whereas the weaker lifter might need 5 sets of 3 reps in order to create the same amount of muscle tissue damage. If you're looking for muscular growth, a stronger lifter might do 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions, whereas the weaker lifter would be better off doing 3 sets of 6 to 10, going a little bit heavier. that little bit of heavierness into their weights is going to add that shear force component that the stronger lifter is getting with higher repetitions because they're just strong enough to still use heavy reps for higher repetitions. So, for example, when I was younger, I remember when I started learning about lifting at 16, I would see in magazines, because we didn't have internet then, that there would be this bodybuilder incline benching 405 pounds. And they'd be like, incline bench, 3 sets of 8 to 10. And I'm like, how the hell are they incline benching 405 pounds for 8 to 10 reps? That feels insane. So I would be like, okay, well, I'll do sets of 8 to 10. So I would do sets of 8 to 10, and I might start, like when I first started benching, I remember my first bench press was 95 pounds. I got stuck under the bar. I was not a very strong person. So I was 16 years old. I tried to bench 95 pounds and couldn't. I got stuck under the bar and had to roll the bar down my body. But I was starting with nothing, basically. When I would do the incline, I might only be able to use 65 pounds for 10 reps or 8 reps. And I'm like, man, next week maybe I'll try, 75, but I couldn't. I'd maybe only get 70. The next week I would try, maybe I can get 75 this time. I couldn't. I'd maybe only get it for like 6 reps. And I'm like, damn, so I got to go back down and make sure I stay in that 8 to 10. So since I tried to stay in 8 to 10 all the time, as the magazine said, I didn't get stronger very quickly at all. I would have been so much better off doing sets of like 3 to 6. I would have gotten stronger a lot faster. I would have created more shear force damage. I would have gotten bigger a lot faster. So that advice was absolute shit, and I'm still mad about it. 22 years later, and I'm still pissed off because those were the experts, and here they were giving crap advice, which is one of the many reasons why I'm motivated to make these free podcasts, because I want to actually give good advice. So it stunk because I wasted years of my life chasing after what these strong people did, but I was never going to progress the way they did because I wasn't strong yet. So there was a different need for what I would have needed at a 16-year-old with 0 years experience lifting versus a professional in their late 20s with 10 plus years of lifting experience. So it absolutely is crap that they didn't tell me that. Very frustrated. But this is the difference. So when we talk about men and women, should they train differently? No, if you have the same goal, train the same. But weaker lifters versus stronger lifters, should they train the same? Hell no. No. So this is why, one of the many reasons why I believe in individualized programming. So I like writing programming one-on-one for the actual person I'm talking to, because I need to know, I want to know where are they weak at, where are they strong at, and then their repetitions and set counts need to be different based on those areas. Too many times people buy templates offline, and it's like maybe a program to become a men's physique competitor. And it's like, yeah, but if you have 10 years experience or 5 years experience or no years experience, that should be a different program. 100% should be a different program. So that is kind of the answer to all this is, should men and women train the same? Yes, if you have the same goal, train the same. But male or female, if you're weaker, you should train differently than somebody who's stronger. So if you're weaker, you do need to do more of the heavier lifts, more working sets. Don't add more reps, because that's just going to make the weight that required for you to lift actually lighter. You don't want to do that. So you want to add more working sets into the heavier weight loads. You still want to do all the small stuff to build your base and support and work on that coordination of technique and the safety for your joints. But if you're a weaker lifter, you're not going to benefit as much from those heavier sets. So you might need to add a set or two. So if you're a weaker lifter and you have a program strictly strength based or muscle building based, and your heaviest lifts in that workout that day. So if you look and it's like, okay, I have dumbbell chest press, I have 3 sets of 6 to 10 reps. Do 4 sets or 5 sets. So add a little bit more. Add 1 or 2 more sets to the heaviest things. Don't worry about the lighter things. If you're looking at, tricep press downs, don't try to add a set to every damn thing in the workout. It's going to take forever. Just pick 1 or 2 of the heaviest movements within the workout and add a set or 2. And that'll automatically make this program a lot more personalized for your needs. Okay? Cool. Well, if you want to check it out on our website, www.brutalirongym.com, I added a programming examples page to our website, and you can see some of the programs I write for my clients and what the different structures look like and all the different information that I share. So if you want to check that out, there's 4 free programs up there right now. I'm going to work on keep uploading more and more and more. Eventually, I want to have a lot of content on that site now that I figured out how to do that and whatnot, and I have the time. So the business has been growing really well. So thank you, and I feel very blessed, and I want to continue to give back. So I give back through the free podcast, and now I want to start implementing more free material on the website. So go check out our website, www.brutalirongym.com. Awesome. Well, if you have any questions, whether it's a follow-up to this podcast or just some, brand new off-the-wall questions, send them in. I always want to be able to help answer any questions you have. Okay, well, our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com, by the way. There you go, brutalirongym@gmail.com. So if you like today's podcast or the podcast in general, please consider sharing the podcast. If you share it on social media, that does reach the most amount of people. But even if you're just sharing a conversation, that's great as well. We just want more people to know about it. If more people know about the podcast and they listen into it, hopefully we can help more people live their healthiest and happiest lives. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I really appreciate the people who sign up to give donations. You can sign up at our website, which is www.brutalirongym.com. There's options there for a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. I just really appreciate it. It helps cover some of that cost. I give an hour to the podcast every day, and I want to keep it for free. So I really appreciate the financial support. Thank you very much. If you like the information we share on our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.